Welcome back to session 35. In the last session, we talked about the Taoist approach of basically, uh, I guess I would summarize as the approach of trend following, problem resolving approaches, right? So basically, for a Taoist, you would often need to, and of course, you want to analyze the situation, how it's evolving, at what stage, but primarily to identify the trend and to follow the trend and to develop your strategy of the problem resolutions, right? So, uh, to do that, you would, of course, have to opt between the actions and inactions. Well, this is already a given that you already identify the, evolving trend, and your strategies are set on trend following, and then basically you opt to actions or inactions, as where and when necessary, right? So a lot of time, people tend to believe inactions are either the sign of weakness, and nevertheless, always tend to make the quote unquote smart moves. The smart move lots of time is I guess, um, the motivation of such smart moves a lot of time is trying to prove to oneself as smart, which we really don't know if that's wise. And other times, the smart move is really try to impress others or convince the adversaries, in a competitive situation, to make such a move more for what it appeared, to others, rather than actually uh, the effectiveness and the efficiency. The Taoist approach, though, it is never intended for how it looks to oneself or to any others. It it is probably uh, going to be considered carrying actually no weight at all, because whatever it looks, it does not matter. If you make a move at all, you want to make this move actually counts to produce the projected effects, right? And when this move is made, it better make a big difference, good for quite a while, right? Otherwise, actions may or may not really, be worthy or even better than inaction, because lots of time inaction, uh, I guess, provide the room for you to observe the smart moves by the other side before you decide, what will be the proper action or in further inaction on your side. Because if we try to fit this into the Western typical, way of thinking, you don't show your card, but you're reading the other side before you make your move. So inactions in a lot of times, under a lot of circumstances for Taoists, is actually more important than actions. You do not show your cards, right? So this is the what we need to know from the Taoism teaching. We don't really necessarily regard all moves are of actions. Some moves, and it is a move, inaction can be and should be a move, right? Why? Because this would enable your better observation when you sit and watch the evolution in a more and a more clear trend, or in a pattern that shows a trend, so that you can set your strategy. So at least in the process of such observation, when you start to form a much better strategy, this inaction becomes very critical. And that was basically in a scenario, people versus people in a competitive situation. But it doesn't have to be like that. It could also be a problem solving towards anything that is somewhat related to, let's say, in a natural environment. A lot of time, the immediate response is required, and you do have to respond, right? So in those cases, it's not about the inaction, it's about the proper action, which basically you don't want it like just like a quick problem solving kind of patching kind of solution, which you just constantly on the reactive move, and one after another. So each one you created, a new smaller problem, or actually a series of problems. So every time you patch up one problem, you have 3 or 5 or even more smaller problems, basically spinning into different directions, and you're just basically exhausting your resources. So while the timing of an action is important, what is the proper action? You still need to identify the trend. So this is all qualitative and quantitative analysis required, which comes with the knowledge, expertise, skill set, all relevant, or actually immediately relevant, and accumulated to quite a scale for you to be able to make the right decision, and then the prompt and accurate execution in things like natural disasters, anywhere from, let's say, earthquake or typhoon, or today the coronavirus, that sort of things. Obviously, timing of action is important, but proper action of the right decision. So when we talk about the right decision, there's always this, I guess, cognition, at the center, which is basically how you look at things, your perspective, right? And when you have the knowledge, how do you use that knowledge? We mentioned before, picking up some knowledge, the pace you pick up knowledge could lead to, certain reference as smarter of someone, but being able to apply the knowledge widely, properly, would be a wisdom, right? So to be able to make the, the right decision, and to stay right for a longer period of time, requires wisdom. Otherwise, the action, basically prompted by a decision, right or not right, I guess remain, uh, I guess to be judged later with the result. In English, people say ends justify means, but it's really more about the decision making, right? So, and then the decision making, basically leads to uh, what we just talked about. How do you look at something, and you know, in a perspective, in a system, your decision or a series of decisions will certainly make the strategic differences. And the difference between well, at least let's just compare. We're saying that ancient Chinese systems, as part of the core Chinese values, comparing to the Confucianism teaching and the Taoism teachings. Uh, Once again, my personal take is the Confucianism teachings are often, as regarded by myself, more on the technical level, right? So those are more involved in the technical decisions, as versus the Taoism teaching is to offer you the wisdom to form the strategies on the much higher level for the bigger picture and the broader view, so that you could see through and have your decision with a longer lasting effect. Obviously, hopefully more effective and efficient. So I think that's the difference. It does not matter whether this was about a people issue or just a natural problem solving. I think once again, a wisdom is about how do you apply as wide as possible in range for all different kinds of problems, right? That apply that knowledge, not about how fast you pick up knowledge or how big the knowledge body already accumulated to. Uh, so this is where I guess if you're some kind of scholar and you're so knowledgeable, you sit over your own knowledge. I guess evident by all those academic papers published at the I guess very established journals. But then in life, do you actually apply those knowledge at many different, I guess, problem-solving circumstances? Or are you just sharing that, your own choose discoveries with the general public through the publishing? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, wisdom. I don't want to repeat what the analogies I offered in earlier sessions, but the whole point of study Taoism teachings here, we are supposed to be doing this in a somewhat book club, and I'm only sharing my own experience and how I come to, I guess my learning experience, of Dao De Jing, this book. So the whole point going back is basically about the actions and inactions, but the ground for the actions and inaction, and then the effectiveness, the objective of such actions and inactions, which all goes back to the third sentence, of the Taoist cognition, right? So there's a lot of things that is more required of quantifying measures so that you can observe the change pattern for the historical uh, trend to be identified. But then there are also, others uh, in a different category that you don't necessarily need any analysis at all, right? That part I think I'll reserve for the next session. And this session is all about, how do you use the quantifying measurement to observe the change pattern and to identify the historical trend. And then with that trend, how do you form your strategy so that you can make the good decisions, and with that good decision, the actions and inactions for the longer lasting effects. Okay, more productive, more precise, more efficient as the resolutions to whatever the problem come your way, right? Now that is a Taoist approach. So until next session, ciao for now.